Hey, everybody. Hey, Osama. You ready to talk today? Looks like you're the one
Yeah,
scheduled item. Great.
yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. I looked through the slides and the notes for the recent hackathon um, last
Mhm.
month, and looked like there was a lot of activity. Looked pretty
Yeah, it
interesting.
was yeah, it was great. I think it was a nice opportunity for us to meet together and discuss. So we also had like Ericsson people who were joining, and they had a new perspective which we had never thought for the specific work, like the PSK stuff. And it was very
Hmm.
interesting to know their perspective and some of the work that they had done on the PSK based intra handshake attestation, because for their networking kind of application, they have the keys already available and they would like to model it that way. So this was one kind of a perspective that we didn't consider in our model so far. So we had some
Hmm.
feedback, good discussions, and overall it was great.
Yeah, looked like a lot of ground was covered during that day. I was just the notes were pretty dense, and there was a huge range of topics, including a hackathon in the afternoon. It was like, wow, they got through all this. I'm like impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite hectic. We were actually planning also another one in the next days over some weekend sometime. Let's see how it goes. So we have to get together, uh,
Hmm.
the
Can
team.
can I have access to the notes?
Yeah, sure. So I can put it in the chat, or I can add also to the meeting notes.
I think I found the link on the in the Slack channel. Thomas put all sorts of links and stuff. So if you have
Mhm.
access to the
Yeah.
Slack channel, the attestation channel and the CCC.
If you can send me an invitation to the Slack channel.
I think the Slack channel should be linked in the attestation meeting notes. Yeah, there's a link in the attestation meeting notes to join the CCC Slack channel. So that's probably the best place to start. And I'll put the link for the meeting notes in the meeting chat right now.
When I get the meeting notes, I will get the link to access the channel, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I've put the link into the chat. So for the
Good,
minutes of the hackathon.
good, good, good.
Um,
That's exactly what we need.
okay, perfect.
So we're 5 minutes into the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get going for today's CCC attestation SIG. Looking at the notes, we have one topic for today, which is Osama talking about, I think, the current status of attested TLS formal verification. But before we jump in there, does anybody have anything they want to bring up quickly before Osama takes it away?
Yeah, just very briefly, if any of you are going to be at the summit tomorrow and Thursday, I really look forward to seeing you there. And please make yourselves known.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks, Mike.
Mike, I hope to see you there, but unfortunately I didn't get the visa.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, another time maybe.
Enjoy.
Anyway, but anyone is there, yeah, I'll wave from here. So.
Yeah, we can only wave. Hope we can meet some other time. So and hope you that the summit goes well and enjoy. Yeah.
I don't know what is going on. I am chairing a workshop in ICC, and all of a sudden, few people are saying we will not be able to attend the panel or present this or that because of visa. Is it difficult now to get a visa to US?
Are you asking me
No,
or
anybody.
in general? Yeah. I think
Because
depends on the nationality. perhaps
Yeah.
many people don't have to even apply for a visa. They can apply for ESTA or something. So
Oh,
it's very, and I think currently also the political situation in the US is also very unstable. And so there are a number of factors, I think, which are still involved in
you're right.
things. And the
You're
main
right.
thing I think which was lacking was I was told that it has to be pushed around from the US. So unfortunately, the organizers did not have much support in that respect. So there has to be some pushing force that a number of applications are lying on their table. They have to push something around and something has to
Okay,
happen.
that's useful to know for next time, Sama. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry it hasn't happened, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so as I was saying, we have one topic for today. We had one tentatively scheduled. Tyler was going to talk about key broker attestation service in Verti, and that's been pushed out a couple weeks. So today we have Osama talking about I think the status of formal verification for attested TLS. So Osama, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I will quickly share the slides, and I have one screen only. So Greg, if you can please help with any comments in the chat, so that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, I hope you can see the slides now. Should I start? Do you see the slides?
We do.
Yeah, I see the slides.
Okay, perfect. Right, so this is a kind of a status update on the two projects or the intersection of the two projects that we have on attested TLS. And we are still the same team as we had updated last time. So I have in the agenda everything like the background material, and my first question would be if someone is new, should I kind of repeat what the motivation was and why we were doing this? Otherwise, I can skip directly to the formal analysis and the map that we have created and the model and the properties and so on.
Yeah, if you could just give me like a 5-minute. My name is Jeremy Powell. I'm from A&D. If you could just give me like a 3-minute
Sure.
overview.
Yeah, quick, sure. I will do that. So TLS, as you know, is the world's most used cryptographic protocol, and it's used in transport of the data. And conceptually, it's basically consisting of two main protocols, which are the handshake and record protocols. And a quick idea of the TLS handshake. So the left leg of the protocol in the last slide. So this is showing what goes on inside the handshake protocol. Client initiates the connection with the client hello, offering different Diffie-Hellman options and other options which it supports. Server hello selects these encrypted extensions. Some of the extensions which it would like to encrypt, it can put inside that. And then for authentication, certificate verify, and finished messages. And finally, from the client side, also the finished message. And based on that, it can create a secure data channel or a secure connection. And here is a little bit of more detail about this, what happens inside each of these messages. So each of these messages has now been expanded a little bit to give more details on this. And broadly speaking, there are like two high-level conceptually stages of the handshake protocol, namely the unauthenticated key exchange, which is shown as the first step here. Client hello, server hello, and encrypted extension, in which, as I said, they negotiate some parameters like Diffie-Hellman and so on. So, and also like which of the parameters will be used will be selected by server in the server hello message. And that's the both parameter key negotiation and key exchange and parameter negotiation. And secondly, the authentication part, which includes the key confirmation, meaning that the key, which is the private long-term key of the server, it provides the key confirmation by signing with this key, which is also sometimes called the proof of possession, which this client can then verify. So this assumes server as being authenticated. So client can also be authenticated. Then we have also a certificate coming from this, and server first requesting that. So this is a very simplified kind of a basic logic of the TLS 1.3, showing the server as being authenticated. So I will, by the way, so keep flowing in case you have any questions or comments. So as I said, so please speak up and then we will discuss these. So TLS is good, has been used, formally verified, and all that thing has been done, standardized as well. New extensions are being added. However, the problem with the standard TLS is that it does not have any validation of the security state of endpoint, software, and platform. And why do we need that? We need, for many use cases such as confidential computing, we need a comprehensive set of security metrics. And that's where we actually need to know the state of the endpoint, and not only that the key is recognized as the server. So we also need what hardware is it protected by and what kind of software is running on that. So that
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So then the idea is that to overcome this limitation, the proposal in the ITF draft was to apply RATLS, like attestation to TLS. And I removed the slides on attestation, I assume for the sake, so everybody knows that. So the idea there is basically we are combining the two protocols now, attestation and TLS. And it can be done in 3 different ways. So this is the this is shown here, like pre-handshake attestation, intra-handshake attestation, and post-handshake attestation. That relates back to the handshake protocol, which I quickly just described. And more precisely, this is like this, that so the timeline which was flowing downward in that slide, so is now flowing time to the right, which means that basically we have the TLS handshake protocol here. And the 2 steps that I explained, key exchange and parameter negotiation, and the second one, authentication, including the proof of possession, is here green. And so from the attestation perspective, when we want to add attestation to the TLS protocol, the key point is at what point in time the signature is done over the claims, and shown here as the signing of evidence. And if it is done before the TLS has even started, and more precisely, the TLS handshake protocol has even started, it is pre-handshake attestation. If it happens inside TLS handshake, and more precisely within the authentication part, it is the intra-handshake attestation. And if it happens afterwards, it is the post-handshake attestation. That is, the secure channel has been established and we transmit the evidence over that established secure channel. So the 3 key ways to combine attestation with a TLS protocol in order to give more information about the stack, which is on which the TLS endpoint is residing. So given an overview of the 3 things, a widely used protocol in, I think, most of the deployments is actually Intel's RATLS, for example, and it lies in the category of pre-handshake attestation, as I defined in the last slide, and is used in Grameen, RATS TLS, Open Enclave Attested TLS, and SGX SDK Attested TLS, among others. So, okay, I will pause for a second to see if everything is good, and then I will continue with what goal we had about formal verification, and then continue.
Okay, can I ask, I think, a high-level question?
Yeah.
So one of the thoughts when I think about attested TLS is, I know practically when I would want to use an attested TLS channel, ultimately I need to trust the workload on the other side. So for example, even just basic TLS, right? If I don't trust the workload on the other side, I'm not actually assured that I'm talking to code that's running inside of a TEE, because at some point, or there is some code running in a TEE that's doing these activities, but it could be allowing the key used for TLS to be extracted from the TE environment and into, code that's not in the TE environment, and that and that could actually be, terminating the TLS channel. So is that at all considered in the modeled in the model, or is that just something essentially saying out of scope for the activity here, and that's a different problem?
So the parts which are linking the two protocols, like how the attestation protocol will be linked with the TLS protocol. So the linking or the binding is part of or within the scope of what we are verifying. But I think that the long-term goal in our mind was to eventually the other project, which was like the formalization of the like ARM CCA and Intel TDX, which we did for the other project. So ultimately the goal was to combine the two things. So we started here with a very simplistic model. We don't assume something specific here. So, but ultimately, I think all the things that you mentioned would be somehow, at least to some extent, considered within the model. And when I will explain the more technical parts of the Intel RATLS, so I will be happy to get some ideas or some feedback on what do you think is, what comes immediately to your mind that you think is missing from the picture. And that was one reason for discussion.
Greg?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead,
Mike Bursell here. Just to say this is something we thought about very hard when we were doing the NARCS project, and it was fundamental to our approach there. It's probably worth talking about offline or in a different context, or we can go through it here at some point, but it is absolutely an issue. I look forward to seeing what Osama's done, but if you want to have a chat about that,
Okay.
I'm very happy to discuss it.
I think for my purpose, I just wanted to, there's two things behind my question. One is, am I misreading the circumstances here? It seems to me without trusted code, without the code in the TEE must be part of the TCP, and for the TLS channel to actually terminate in the DE, that code has to be trusted, and hence you have to be able to measure it and understand it's what I call the workload identity. So first I want to make sure that what I thought was a very important point is actually other folks think is important and necessary. And the other is I'm trying to get a sense of whether the folks working in attested TLS areas are thinking of this problem, because to me it seems like ultimately attested TLS doesn't work in a real world example without this problem being solved.
So unless you can prove that the TCB includes the certificate, the TLS stack, basically, you're not winning anything, is what you're saying, right?
I think that and it may not be actually that deep. So if you look at comments, I think the IETF proposal for attested TLS that Hans and Thomas and so are working on, they talk about split implementation, so on. I think that the key that's the trusted signing key that's used for this channel, that can never leave the TEE. And so you could have parts of the stack outside of the TEE, and the only damage they can do is essentially DOS, right? They can corrupt the data on the fly, and that ultimately won't be accepted on the other side, or they can stop communication, but they cannot essentially make any signed statements of something or the other.
So I think there's a little more to it than that. Let's have this conversation on another occasion, because I want to let Osama. So I don't know who's running this meeting, but we should make sure Osama gets a chance to go through his things. I think these are important points, and I'd love to discuss them, Greg.
I agree. So let's let Osama continue. And my question has been confirmed. There is some complication here, and I think folks in the space are thinking about it.
Right, sure. As I said, so from my perspective, it would be good feedback when I will go to this flow part, where I will explain the flow for RATLS, and we have some proposed mitigations fix, which is moving towards the intra kind of thing. And here I would like to have your opinion on what do you think is kind of missing here. Okay. So what we have as the goal continuing here, so is the formal analysis of security of Intel's RATLS protocol, as I said, is widely used. And the approach is at a high level, like it's using symbolic compared to computational, which is another technique for formal methods. And the tool we used is ProVerif. And at a high level, like viewing different blocks, there are some specifications which come from somewhere, let's say IETF draft or Intel's white paper in this case. And from there, we build a formal model. On the right side, we extract the security properties, what kind of properties will be interesting. So in very few cases, this is specified. So mostly we have to think from ourselves, that's one part. And then we do the formal analysis within this ProVerif tool. And the formal model has to be also validated. That was kind of an orthogonal part of this, which I skipped for this presentation. And the outcome of all of this, as shown as dotted within ProVerif, is either a proof of that the formal model satisfies this security property, or otherwise it does not, and there is an attack on the protocol. So what were the challenges that we had to deal with were, firstly, the specifications by Intel were incomplete and outdated. What I mean by that is basically they were based on TLS 1.2 and this paper, white paper from Intel. And the specifications came in 2018, while TLS 1.3, as you all know, so is an RFC since August 2018. It was never updated. And what the white paper states is basically attestation as one thing. So how it happens completely orthogonal to what TLS does, and even TLS 1.2, as it's not even describing TLS 1.3. And the first thing to basically do was, okay, so we have two different things. How do we actually integrate? Or saying a white paper integrating remote attestation with TLS, it was never clear what exactly or how exactly it is integrating the two things. And there we use the implementation to fill the gap, and the community input, including the SIG I presented, I think, a couple of times already. So for that to fill the gaps. From the formal perspective, there were also quite a few challenges. We hoped that combining remote attestation and TLS would be easy, because remote attestation we have already formalized as one another project of the CCC SIG, and TLS exists since I think 2017 or 2018. All these artifacts in different tools, including ProVerif, we need to just combine the two things. But when we look deeper into it, so there were very few comments, and even the main processes, client 1.2, server 1.2, as it also included TLS 1.2, it never had any comment at all in these main processes. So it just throws away the code and go and see yourself, what does it mean? So what we did is we have added extensive comments to this for future extensions, the base TLS model, so that anybody who wants to use for any of the extensions. And by the way, that reminds me of the TLS working group had recently a formal model, formal methods triage panel, which will decide or give its opinion on every extension, whether it is big enough to do the formal verification for that, or does it, or otherwise it does not violate the properties and the formal models are good enough. That means that is basically a trivial change for the formal model, and then we do not need a specific proof. So before every extension goes into the working group last call, so that will be that process will be held. That we will they will get a feedback from the formal methods triage group. And the second issue was that there was incomplete validation, and the formal model itself was very old, like draft 20. There were like, I think 26 or 28 drafts for TLS 1.3. So we designed an automated validation framework for the key schedule specifically. And the third main issue was that a simple extension for the TLS formal model, when we added one specific part of adding the evidence to that, it kept running for 1 month on the high-end server isolate machine. And we submitted it to ProVerif developers for analysis, what's going on, because we didn't understand what's happening there, and they didn't respond to us. So we had to develop the formal model from scratch, all the TLS.
So what you're saying when you say the artifact's running, what you mean is it didn't complete the verification. It took a month and failed to do it. Wow, that's cheering hypothesis right there. Okay, thank you. Halting problem.
So it didn't complete at all. So it was still running, generating more and more horn clauses. So that's what I mean by kept running.
Thank you. Yeah.
So based on that, we have updated a little bit of the approach, meaning that the formal model not only comes from the specification, it also comes from community input. And the double arrow here shows that the specification based on the formal model will be updated, or should at least be updated to TLS 1.3. This part is the same, validation part is the same, so proof and attack as before. So the two things which are new here, could not prove, which as Mike asked. So there is one thing that the tool gives that it could not prove. Then we have to look deeper into it, that what happens. And no result was the case for that 1 month, which means that it keeps running and it never terminates, and which is never described in the ProVerif manual, that this is one of the case for this long time. Anyway, so this was the overview of what we did, and maybe the background of all the thing. And I now want to go to the actual stuff, which is the formal analysis, and to describe like the RATLS in a little bit of more detail to discuss the next steps. So the TLS and the changes shown in red, like RATLS changes the certificate and certificate verify messages. And more precisely, what does it change is that the long-term key is now replaced by an ephemeral key, which is shown by priv ek, the private part of the ephemeral key. And in this case, we are considering the server as the attester. So the first block represents the TLS part, the second, the remote attestation, and third one is the initial knowledge of that participant in the protocol. And the client is acting at the verifying relying party, meaning that it has a verifier embedded within that. So there is no remote connection to, there is no third participant in the protocol, so to say. So the client has a verifier within this. So in the next, we have also the background check model where we separate this. But we first wanted to understand what actually is going on before going to complicated models, which has other problems as well. So this basically describes, again, all the TLS 1.3 messages in black. The logs are stored on both sides, shown as blue. And the step number 1, which is added to the TLS, is the attestation part, which is showing that it has this private key, and it takes the hash of this, stores as the R data, as Intel calls it. So for the user-defined field in general terms. And then there is an evidence which, by using the private part of the attestation key, signs this R data as well as different measurements, which have been aggregated together as device status to represent all of them. Okay, so the changes, as I said, are shown in red, which means that the two changes as described on the last slide are the certificate and the certificate verify messages. What changes in the certificate is that rather than signed by a certificate authority, so we have no certificate authority here. So this is acting as the root of trust for this protocol. And that's why it will self-sign using the same key, which is the private part of the ephemeral key. And basically what it will sign is the public key and the evidence which it generated beforehand, and then send over this certificate as the certificate message to the client. And at the client side, it has to check a couple of things at least, which is the verify the signatures on the evidence. And as I showed, like the initial knowledge, it is assumed that the public part of the attestation key is already pre-configured within the client. which is because it is also the verifier in this case. And then it compares the hashes, all the device status, all the measurements in the device status, which are also kind of pre-known to the verifier or the client in this case. And so because coming back to the server side now, since the certificate was now since it is using now this key rather than the long-term key, the proof of possession will also be based on this. So every message log that it has created, the handshake digest, it will sign it using this key to prove that it has this key to the client. And the client can then extract out the public part from the certificate and verify the signatures with this to synchronize together. So one thing that you would notice is that there are extra events from which do not change the functionality of the protocol. They are only for ProVerif to understand how to write the properties. So the evidence was sent at this point in time to the client. So a sent event has been noted here. And at this point, after the two steps are successfully completed, that is, the signatures are correct and the hashes are that is the device status, all the measurements are as expected, including the MR enclave, MR signer, or whatever the policy is. So everything matches, the TCB is as expected. So what it will do is it will have an event of accepted evidence. Similarly, there is for the next property, which I will describe in a few minutes, is the pre-server finished, that the server has reached this point and is about to send the finished message. And on the other side, the client finished message, that it has received the finished message and it's about to send the client finished message. So this is the overall thing, which is exactly as it is modeled. The only abstraction that we have done is we have removed the encrypted extensions message, which is still a mandatory message, but not required for the basic functionality. Other than that, it is pretty much covering everything from the TLS protocol as well as the key ideas of attestation. So this is, this is exactly representing in simple terms what we have in the model in ProVerif. So I'm not sure if this is a good point, Greg, if you want to maybe follow up on your point on identity, what you mean by that. So is it kind of representing this key, or is it something different than?
I think it's kind of at a slightly higher level. I think it's once this conversation is complete, the parties on each side believe, if the party on the left believes that it's, talking with code running in this protected environment on the right.
Right.
And the observation or the question I'm having is if clearly for this conversation to work, you have to have, code that can access priv AK, which I believe is TE kind of enforced. That's going to be some sort of TE managed key.
Yeah, exactly.
And my question was, once this is all done with, if the code that has access, if the code on the right chooses to leak that key or any other keys that are used, for this secure channel outside of the TEE, there's nothing stopping it from a TEE technology perspective. So the only way to ensure this doesn't happen is you have to establish trust in the code that is being used on the right side to do this whole handshake, right?
Right. I think I think the way you explained is I like that, because we have this already in the model, that if this key is leaked, what happens? So we consider this kind of scenario, that if this key is leaked, and the fix that we have to the RATLS protocol Also, in our understanding, we don't have formally verified the fix to that I will also explain in the slides. I have some slides on that. That's currently a work in progress, but we believe that the client, by applying that kind of protocol, the client will actually know that it has been leaked. This key has been leaked out to somebody else. So that's
I think
Applying what sort of protocol? Could you explain?
yeah, I don't get
So
that.
what I mean is we have a couple of proposed mitigations to the RATLS after doing the analysis. So by that, I mean that for this, we don't have a formal analysis yet. That's currently a work in progress, but I will explain when I come to this stage, probably would be. So in the threat model, I already have that, what you are saying. So I think we will still have time to reach there.
I think from my understanding of the circumstances, if the model were to handle this, there would have to be somewhere in the model, there would be a measurement of all the code that's being run on the right side. And part of the protocol would be the left side would say, I do or don't trust that code, because that code, any code on the right side that could leak keys has to be measured. And then the left side has to say, I trust it. That's
Exactly, and so that's what we did in NARCs. Again, I'm going to explain another occasion because of exactly this problem. You can't you don't get any. All you know is that you have an instantaneous sorry, at a particular instance, shall we say,
yes.
measurement and trust that something has completed. You can't take any further assurances beyond that.
I mean, you could have your TEE, worst case degenerate example as your TEE, has a public endpoint and a pub sub notification thing. And anytime it creates or has knowledge of a key, it freely shares it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what we maybe since you mentioned it, so what we do here in our case is that we have we reuse in the simplest possible fix to the protocol. What we do is basically we reuse the nonce which is coming from the client hello, which is already in the TLS, in the creation of the evidence, and which provides the client the guarantee of the freshness that this evidence or the nonce that it sent out in this part is the same as the one used for the
but that doesn't but the problem is, as soon as you've got this freshness back, you can't be sure of anything. All you know is that it was fresh at the time. It doesn't give you any broader guarantees or assurances about the safety and the protection of keying material, not just the keying material, actually the algorithmic protection as well.
But so talking about specifically the brief EK, I think it would provide some assurance on that, because if this was leaked, the adversary will be able to generate this kind of thing. But it will not be able to generate this unless this brief AK is the attestation key is leaked.
Okay, I agree. I agree with that. That doesn't mean, so you basically you're safe against replay attacks, but that doesn't mean that you can't look at the data later on, and B, once the stream has been, that doesn't mean you can't hand the stream over. Once you've actually got the connection is based on this handshake and isn't safe after that. I agree that this does provide you with replay attack protection.
Yeah. So
as
long as at least this attestation key is still protected. So that's one of the assumptions of this model. So it will provide us some guarantees, at least, that the evidence was generated after this point, after this message was sent. And since this key is protected, we will know that even if this gets modified, the certificate, by checking this, it will recognize that.
Did you have a threat model coming later on? Because that might be the place to address this.
Yeah, so I have it in the slide. So let me go back to the flow where we were. So I think we were here, and that's exactly the next slide. So in the threat model, what we have considered is, as I said in the very beginning, so the non-PSK handshake So we don't consider the PSK and the PSK plus ECDHE modes, which is because to us, at least until the hackathon, what made sense was that it is only useful for this kind of handshakes. But the Ericsson guys had a use case in which actually they need the PSK, because in telecom, their communications, basically they have, both parties have the PSK, and there is a long story behind that. So, but we are considering now how to put it into the model. So that's one thing. Anyway, the formal model only considers non-PSK handshake, which means precisely the ECDHE mode of the TLS 1.3. And the threat model is that we consider the weak hashes, for example, for the attacks like slots. And in the formalization later, it will be represented as weak hash. We consider the weak Diffie-Hellman groups for the attacks like logjam, and bad elements within the strong Diffie-Hellman groups. They are represented by a sent bad element in the formalization. And we consider both cases, that the priv EK, which is the key with the server, the protected by the trusted execution environment. And in case of Intel, that's the ephemeral key, with or without, with and without, I mean, both cases, whether it's compromised or leaked to the adversary and or not. So we consider that both of these cases. But the attestation key we keep without being compromised and assume that it is not a weak key. Therefore, the adversary cannot have access to the private part. So this is, Mike, does this clarify or do you think something is still missing?
Yeah, I think that's clear. I think that it doesn't address the questions that Greg was bringing up, probably, which is fine. But maybe we should be clear that those are out of scope, is all I'm thinking.
Right. Yeah, so the measurements we still consider as constant. So that's the only other part from identity perspective. Yeah. Okay. So based on this threat model, the properties we have are two main properties. One is at the remote attestation layer, and the second one is at the TLS layer, which means that for remote attestation, we need the freshness of evidence that it was freshly generated. And this is in pro-verify syntax that, and the two events that I previously described basically help us to write this property, which means that can a client be sure that every certificate message is freshly generated for this specific instance of the connection, or this specific session, in simple words. So this is what it is representing. And I described a number of shortcomings. So we eliminate all these reasons which we have, like the weak Diffie-Hellman, weak hash, or bad elements within the groups. So what this overall says is that basically, don't show me any attack which has a weak Diffie-Hellman, which has a weak hash or a sent bad element within this. So it eliminates all these known weaknesses, so to say. And then ProVerif shows one trace which does not contain any of these. And here on very small, the two instances of the client have accepted the events, which means that have accepted the same certificate or the evidence. So this is one simplified trace to understand what's going on here. And the thing is, basically, we have three honest processes, server and two instances of the client. This exclamation in ProVerif syntax is showing that these are unbounded number of sessions can be created, and the attacker in between. So what happens here is that this client sends over a client hello, and the attacker receives this and sends over a server hello to him. And the second session sends again a client hello, server responds with the attacker responds with the server hello. And on the server side, attacker generates a client hello message for him, and server responds with the server hello. And it now reaches the point where it has to send the certificate, which was pre-generated. and had no freshness guarantee in Intel's RATLS protocol. And what would happen here is that the attacker will forward it to the first session of the client as well as to the second session of the client, which means that which from Intel's specification was never clear, because on the left side they show that, okay, the challenger is sending over a nonce, but it is never a part of the combination of the protocol. So hence it's very important to have figures like what I showed, like how exactly is the protocol being combined together. The two things, composition of two protocols may not necessarily be secure. So this is showing at the RA, the remote attestation layer, that the evidence within the certificate can be replayed across different sessions. The core reason being the evidence was generated before the TLS started, and there was no binding between the TLS session and the remote attestation protocol. So both of them accepted this, and this is basically the gist of the problem. Second property, TLS layer, server authentication, meaning that there are a lot of things here. So basically what it means is it is representing, is the client sure that it is talking to the server which it thinks it is talking to, and that comes from the other two events we have, that is they agree on the different parameters. I will quickly read out what they mean. They mean that they agree on the client nonce, server nonce as part of these two messages, the pre-shared key, the public key, the parameters offered by the client in the client hello, and the mode which is selected by the server, the selections among those, the key for encryption from the client side, from the server side, and the early master secret and the resumption master secret. So resumption is calculated afterwards. So up till the EMS, they both agree on all of these parameters. Okay, and this is basically, we again eliminate all the known reasons of failures, which means the weak hashes and the bad elements. And probably, I think I missed one more, which was the weak Diffie-Hellman. I think, sorry for that. Okay, so mitigations, I will quickly walk through. So what we started with thinking was, okay, so this Intel's protocol, what are the minimal changes that we can do to fix or mitigate this binding problem? And one of the first things that can be done is to reduce the validity period of the certificates. Although Intel specifies it to be ephemeral certificates, it's generated until 2030 by default for Grameen. For OpenSDK, as well as the Intel SGX libraries, it's even generated until 2050. So this is wildly long to replay the evidence, and is one thing that can be done to at least mitigate some things. The other thing that came to our mind was client can maintain a set of all the evidences that it has seen. And every time when it is, so still having the server as the attester, so the client can check every time, rather than having a check of the nonce, it will have a check that inside the database which I maintain, so do I have or have I seen this evidence before? If not, I can accept, otherwise I will not. But this has a lot of limitations, which include that it will make TLS stateful. The client needs to maintain all possible evidences which it has seen, as well as another issue is that what would happen if the client would like to reconnect later with the same TSP, which means the same evidence. So it will find that evidence within its database and it will never connect to that server again. So one possibility here in our mind was to use the PSK, but there seem to be a lot of limitations for this. This alone, making it stateful itself, is quite bad. And I was wondering if people here have other thoughts about this before going to the intra kind of thing, that is doing the signatures of the evidence within the TLS protocol. If we pre-generate the certificates, if someone has some ideas that we should also consider we would like to hear about this, if someone has any thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan of validity periods like this. It's insane. So let's make that. We should make some statements about that. So what those statements should be, I think, is an interesting one, particularly with current interest around quantum and post-quantum. But that's certainly 2050 is too long. I think that reattesting is really interesting, and I think without a lot more information around what an attestation means and context and policy around that, that's a difficult thing, and I would generally probably not be in favor of it, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
So
And
what about,
also, there's another thing I'd add, actually, which is that the question of rekeying, because generally you're allowed to rekey, and there are rules about rekeying during a session, about rekeying session key. We might want to say that rekeying is not allowed without a reattestation, even if we manage to work out what that means. So rekeying, it might be something that we explicitly ban or certainly make consider a bad thing. Does that make sense to people?
Can you explain a little bit of context for rekeying? Is it coming
Yeah,
from?
yeah. So when you're running a connection, this is post handshake, right? This is in the connection phase.
Yeah.
You are allowed to rekey under most profiles, and there are typically parameters in the handshake, if I remember correctly, around whether rekeying is allowed, how often it's allowed, and stuff like that.
But
And I think one thing.
So which key are we talking about? So
this is the session key. Session key rekeying.
Okay, session key. So the connection has been established. They both have a symmetric
exactly.
key over which they are sending the
So this is
data.
symmetric key rekeying. So we might say that you're not allowed to rekey without because you're making assumptions therefore about the continued goodness, if you will, of this. The alternative might be say that session keying is specifically allowed because you trust the implementation. But that comes back to Greg's question about whether you trust the implementation and to do what. So I think we should think about that, but I don't have a good answer to what that should look like at this point.
Is rekeying the session key also part of, it seems like it must also be part of the TLS protocol. So is it just, is the stance here to take that the analysis isn't complete for the TLS protocol unless it includes commentary analysis on the rekeying operation? Is that another way to say what we're talking about?
I would lean in that direction. It's a bit harsh on Osama, but do you see, Osama, why I'm saying it?
No, I mean, nothing is harsh for researchers. I mean, it's a good direction, and research is always within some scope. But that's really the purpose of discussion, that if we are missing something, we should really be moving towards
well,
that.
I suggest you, I mean, it's been a long time since I looked at the TLS protocol. So I suggest you do look at rekeying of the session key and what the options are.
Yeah, sure.
And once you've done that, we can then make some recommendations about, you know, whether formal verification is applicable in this context, and if it is, what we might do and what we might suggest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. That's
okay.
perfect, fine. Yeah, because I didn't know about this, so this is definitely interesting to explore.
Again, it's a long time since I looked at this, and it's been there since, well, I think it's been there since SSL, and I'm pretty sure it's still in for TLS. So please forgive me if I've misremembered it, but
it's okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Hannes will definitely have something about this in mind if it was a part of this. So, but he didn't mention anything like this or any solution related to this. So I assume, but anyways, so that's still, I mean, a good direction to explore, at least one option to see if that would give us more guarantees about that, or whether we need to model the post handshake parts, because The formal model finishes here. It doesn't go beyond the handshake, because what we do is we see that whether the attester is recognized by the client and so on. So I think that's important direction to consider.
Yeah, so I've just had a quick look. It's in section 4.6.3 of the TLS 1.3 8446 standard is key and initialization vector update. It's typically known as rekeying, I think. But
Awesome.
do have a look, but it was just a very quick check.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Osama.
Okay. Any other thoughts about any possible solution within the pre-handshake before moving to the post one, which I already showed?
Yeah, from a time check perspective, we've got 3 minutes left. So whatever you're thinking about here, probably think about wrapping it up in a handful of minutes if you could.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes now.
Okay.
Whoops, that took a minute, sorry.
So probably it's the so this slide we already discussed. So as part of one of the questions, which was our next proposed fix. So I think before going to background check, probably it's a good point to know if the audience has any other thoughts about this, and then we finalize this part. So I mean, the question I'm asking here is, before we go into having this evidence being signed as part of the TLS handshake, if it is kept pre-handshake, is there any other solution other than the client keeping a state of the evidences, or the other one, not a fix, really a mitigation to reduce the validity? Is there something else other than the keying stuff that Mike mentioned? So does something else comes to someone's mind that we might have missed, or we should look into, or something like that?
Nothing's jumping to mind for me apart from what I already talked about, but I haven't thought
Okay.
about it at a huge depth. This is great. Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot for the discussion and the feedback. So I will stop here and yeah, go back to Greg.
All right, cool. So thank you very much, Osama. Certainly a lot of learnings here for me. So really appreciate your presentation. So
Greg, are you going to be at the summit or not?
I will not. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. We'll catch you another time.
Yeah. All right, so we're back on again in 2 weeks, and none of the other chairs are here, so I'll coordinate offline as to who's going to chair it, but we do have a couple topics on hand. So the Verti key broker stuff, and what's the other one? The other one was the AMD SEV S&P formal security analysis. There's not going to be enough time for both, I don't think, but each one was not slated to occupy full hour, so we'll let the next chair figure out how to prioritize those, or perhaps delay one. So,
thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good couple of weeks.
Thank you. Bye.